So my name is Pooja Viswanathan, and I'm actually here wearing two hats today. So one as the co-founder of Braze Mobility, but also as a researcher at the University of Toronto and the Toronto Rehab Institute. And so I'm here today to talk about building an accessible world through inclusive innovation. And so I'm not really here today to really pitch my research or my company. Really the reason why I'm here is because I think a couple months ago, Terrence and Torrance, Hamish and I were all in a room and we talked about how we need to talk more about our challenges and struggles and how we can really work together to solve the problems that we're facing today. So I'm really here to talk more about challenges and about maybe some things in the near future that you can look forward to. So I'm going to backtrack a bit and go back to my early days as an undergrad. And so it was a typical day in the life of a student, walking around across campus, and I stopped dead in my tracks, right? And anyone here who is a student or has been a student will I'm sure will resonate with this. I stopped because I smelled food. And it wasn't just fast food, it was like gourmet meal, right? I could smell it, I just knew it. So I let my nose guide me and I wandered through. And a student will also know that the only thing better than the smell of food is the smell of free food. And so I see all this free food lying around and I started going and grabbing the food, stuffing my mouth. And then as I'm licking the food off my fingers, I look around and think, you know what, I should probably figure out what this event here is all about, where they're serving this food. So I walk around and I realize that this is actually a seminar. So it was like a term-end seminar for a design project course at the University of Waterloo. And so as I walk around, I see a bunch of projects that a bunch of students there had done. It was all, the theme that term had been assistive technologies. And so as I'm walking around, I look at all these assistive devices and technologies that the students had built. One of them was actually a wayfinding device for the blind. And so I look around and think, I step back a bit and say, as much as I'm, not fulfilling all these primal needs right now, hunger and sleep and all this other stuff, there's a bigger question here. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was really in that phase where I was trying to figure things out. So I looked at where I was at. I was in a computer science undergrad. I love technology. I love building stuff. I had chosen a bioinformatics option because I was really interested in improving quality of human life. But I saw what was going on around me and I thought, I've always felt so strongly about equal opportunity, for freedom, for independence. That's something that's always really resonated very strongly with me. And I felt like this was a field where I could really make a difference and something that I really believed in. And so I made a few connections and I happened to meet this individual named Jorge Silva, who is actually the co-founder of Tekla, coincidentally, who you will hear more about later. And Jorge introduced me to this lab called the Intelligent Assistive Technology and Systems Lab at the University of Toronto. And so at the time, there were two projects that were going on there. The first project was a system to help older adults with dementia wash their hands. So it was a system that monitored people washing their hands and then prompted them to help them through the task. The second project was what was called an intelligent wheelchair project. So in this system, there was sensors around the wheelchair, and the aim of the sensors was to prevent people from crashing into things while they were driving their wheelchair. So I thought to myself, okay, I had the choice to be in one of these. I'm like, you're going to let me drive an electric-powered device, and you're going to let me crash test? This is too cool, right? So I made up my mind, that's what I wanted to do. And so at the beginning, it really was just a cool project that I wanted to be part of, but it really became something more. So a couple of weeks later, I made a trip to a long-term care facility, and when I walked in, I saw a bunch of residents, majority of the residents there actually, slumped over in their manual wheelchairs. They couldn't propel themselves because they didn't have the strength to propel themselves, and they weren't allowed to use powered wheelchairs, which would have been a much better option, but a lot of them had dementia. So they had cognitive or visual or other kinds of impairments that prevented them from driving safely. And so really the only independent means of mobility that they could have had was taken away or denied. And so this really was a problem and I really wanted to solve it. And so I decided this wasn't really just a 3-month project, it was really something more. So I took off and went to the University of British Columbia where I started my PhD. And so just looking at the timeline there, so I started in 2006. It took me 4 years to build a working prototype. The picture that you see there is an early prototype. What you see there is a camera, and what this system did was it not only prevented collisions, but also gave directions for people with dementia in case they forgot where they were going, so it would tell them how to get from point A to point B. So I built the system, and then if anyone here knows how research works, you develop a system, you then go and test it. So I tested in this crazy maze, so I got 6 people with mild to moderate dementia in a long-term care facility to drive with and without my system in this maze, and they had to get from the start of the maze to the end. And then, of course, at the end of all of that research, what you do is publish, right? So I published. And so this is a screenshot. It doesn't really explain the axis very well, but what you're seeing on the y-axis is collisions. This middle section is when my system was activated. The outer parts were when the system was deactivated. So really all this image is saying is when the system was activated, it brought down the number of collisions. I also showed improvement in terms of how people were finding their way around the maze. So that was all great. I got my PhD and I was done now, right? But there were a few big problems with this entire process. 3 problems really. The first problem was that as I did this study, I found a lot of usability issues. But I didn't really have the opportunity to now incorporate that feedback into the design. It was out of scope of my project. I ran out of time and resources. They wanted me to graduate. Number 2, I didn't talk to my first end user until 4 years after I started developing. Right? Had I actually started talking earlier, I probably would have done things a lot differently. And that's something that I really regretted. And the third one, which was probably the scariest thing, was that I realized that my research results were going to end here. I published the paper, and if I didn't continue forward on this project, really nothing was going to happen. There were going to be other master's PhD students coming in, but they were all going to be working on different projects and features. And so I decided I didn't want this to end. And so I came back to Toronto, and I started a postdoctoral fellowship. But more recently, I also started Braze Mobility. And really, my goal has been in the last few years to take all this great research that happens in our labs, and specifically the research that I've worked on, and really bring them out into market, into the hands of real users. So I'm not really going to talk much about the company. This is just a screenshot from an interview we had with CTV that kind of discusses how the system works. And you feel free to check out our website. Our website actually just launched today, so it's our 0th birthday today. www.brazemobility.com, and that's my plug. That's it. So really what I've been working on for the last few years, not just in the company, but also going back now to the research environment, is how do we improve research and innovation? How do we be more inclusive? And so that's the term that I mentioned, inclusive innovation. How do we talk to not only end users, but their caregivers, clinicians, all the stakeholders involved? How do we bring everyone together and solve these problems? We face so many challenges today in getting accessible products and services to market, and we need to work together. We can't be working in these individual silos. And so I really hope that we push forward in that direction. This is my team. We have really, really diverse skills and abilities, and we continue to forge these partnerships. So the last point in terms of where we're going from here, we're really happy. Braze Mobility and Enables Me is actually going to be co-hosting an ideathon. So this is an accessibility ideathon. We call it an ideathon, not a hackathon, because it's more about ideas than actually building stuff. So everyone is invited to come. We're hoping to get a really diverse group of people out there. We're aiming for last week of April, first week of May. It's happening at the Toronto Rehab Institute. So if you have any questions, you can talk to any of us, and we'd love to have you there. We'd love to continue these discussions. We really need to work together to bring some really cool products out, so let's do it.